Welcome to my channel. I am G Joy. I want to say a big thank you to all my subscribers for supporting this channel. For you who is just joining us, you are welcome. Kindly click on the subscribe button before you continue watching, and also put on the notification bell so you'll be notified each time I post a new video. In today's class, we'll be learning about the 6 pieces skirt. We'll be learning how to calculate it and how to draft it. So we'll be using the board for illustration. So let's go to the board. Here is a sample of the 6 pieces skirt. It's called 6 pieces because the front parts is like sharing the skirt into 6 parts, okay? 3 for the front and 3 for the back. And then this is a sample. This is for the front. We have 1, 2, 3. Then for the back, the number 2 is further divided because of zipper allowance. So here is 1. Both of them are 2, and then we have 3. So there are different ways you can draft the 6 pieces skirt. You can draft it without band, and also you can also draft it with a band. Now, how do you calculate the 6 pieces skirt? The measurements you'll be needing for a 6 pieces skirt are the waist measurement, the hip measurement, the knee measurement, and then the skirt length. Also, you'll be needing the waist to hip, the waist to knee. Now, when you are drafting a 6 pieces skirt, if it is a skirt that is going to have an elastic or a rope, when you are doing your calculation, you make the hip and the waist to be the same. Here is the waist, here is the hip, and of course this place is the knee, and then the hem of the skirt, the skirt hem. So from here is the skirt length, the full length of the skirt. So if your skirt is going to have a rope or an elastic, it has to be able to pass through the hip area. So you make the waist and the hip the same measurement. You use the same measurement. You use the measurement of the hip for the waist, so that you cannot pass your rope through. But if the skirt is going to have a zipper, you don't necessarily need to make both of them the same. However, there are some calculations you need to know before you can go ahead to draft a 6 pieces skirt. Now, the fullness of the skirt depends on the amount of fabric that you have, and it depends on the style that you are making. To make a 6 pieces skirt, you will need about 2.5 yards to 3 yards of fabric. And if it's going to be a very full skirt, you may even need up to 4 yards. So it depends on the amount of fabric that you have. Now, when you are making a 6 pieces skirt, you need to do some calculations first. For example, for this tutorial class, the waist to hip is 9, the waist to knee is 18. Normally, when you want to make a 6 pieces skirt, you will not use the exact knee measurement of the client. If the knee measurement of the client, if the waist to knee of the client is 20, you go at least 2 inches above the knee, so that the client will be able to walk well when he's wearing the skirt. So the waist to knee, we are using 18. And then the waist that we are using for this illustration is 26. The waist is 26. The hip is 40. Now, because it is a 6 pieces skirt or a 6 part skirt, we'll be dividing them by 6. This waist, the waist circumference 26, we divide it by 6. And when you divide 26 by 6, you are going to have 4.3. You are going to have 4.3. Now, it is always good to have some extra allowances to your skirt so that you don't end up with a very, very tight skirt. So this 4.3, you can take it to the nearest number, though you cannot round this up, but you can just make it 4.5. And then the hip of 40, if we divide 40 by 6, we are going to have 6.7. We are going to have 6.7, and then you can just make this 7. Now, another thing we need to take note of is that we have joining allowance and we also have seam allowance. To join 1 to 2, you need ½ inch on this side and you also need ½ inch on this side. To join 2 to 3, you also need ½ inch on this side and ½ inch on this side. So invariably, for this number 2, for example, you will need extra 1 inch because you will use half to join the 2 to 1, and you also use half to join the 2 to 3. So you will need an extra 1. Okay, so I'm going to be explaining each of the piece, but I just want to explain the seam that we need. And then for this number 1, we need a seam allowance to join 1 to 2, which is 0.5. And also, we need a side allowance. If you are going to be turning with a lining, you need ½ inch allowance to do that. And then you need sewing allowance. And for some, you may also need ease allowance. So, at the end of the day, you find out that this number 1, you are going to be needing about 2 inches allowance. About 2 inches. Whereas for number 2, you will need about 1 inch allowance. And then number 3 is just like number 1 because they are both by the side. So number 3, you also need about 2 inches allowance. So that is for the front panel. Now let's come to the back panel. For the back piece, let's start from 2. You will discover that if you are going to use an elastic or a rope, then you don't need any extra allowance. You don't even need to create, you don't even need to cut the middle part into 2 if you are not going to use a zipper. You will simply duplicate what you have in this front piece for the back piece. But if you are going to have a zipper, it means that the center front and the center back cannot be the same. So for the center front, you are adding 1 inch. For the center back, you are going to add extra. That is, you will add the 1 inch, then you will also add zipper allowance. So we discover that for number 2, for the back panel, if 1 inch is the same that you need to join 1 and 3 to 2, you also need 1.5 for zipper allowance. So at the end of the day, for this number 2, you will need 2.5 inches allowance. And then for number 1 and number 3, they are just like the front panel. Number 1 and number 3 will be like, you don't need zipper allowance for that. You only need the joining allowance. You only need the allowance to join to number 2 and then the side allowance. So you will be using the same pattern as the front piece. So if you are going to cut your pattern, the only patterns that will be different is the center front, the center back, and then the side 1 and 3 they will be the same. So having understood that, how do we now fold our fabric? To fold our fabric, like I said earlier, it depends on the amount of fabric that you are going to have. If you are using a 2.5 yards of fabric, you have to factor how wide you want it to be, so that you don't start cutting and then run short of fabric. So a yard of fabric is equal to 36 inches. But there are some fabric that the yardage is not up to 36. There are some that are 35. So do well to measure yours. So let's work with the one of 35. So it means that 2 yards, another 1 yard again, you have another 35. You are going to have 70. If it is the one of 36, you are going to have 72. So that is why you need to measure. And then for half yard, half of 36 is 18, but half of 35 is 17.5. So at the end of the day, you discover that the 2.5, you have a total of 87.5 inches in length, and the one of 36 is going to give you 90 inches in length. So you will now try to divide them by 6 and see how much fabric you are going to have. Okay, so if, for example, you want each panel to be 15 inches wide, and you are going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, they are going to be the same, times 4. This will give us 60. And then for the two middle, let's assume that those ones will be, let's say 17, and you multiply 17 by 2. This is going to give you 34. 60 plus 34, you are going to have 94. So if you are using 2.5 yards of the one that is of 36 inches per yard, it means that you cannot cut this wideness. That means the wideness of the panel you cannot use 15. You have to use less than 15. So you have to go for, say, 12 or 13. So that is how to calculate before you start cutting. Not that after cutting you now run short of fabric. But if you are going to make use of a 3 yards fabric, then you will be able to make the wideness of the skirt to be 15, because 36 multiplied by 3 will give us 108. So you will be able to make the wideness of the skirt 15. So it is, I would say that we are making the wideness of your skirt. After you have something that you can use as a guide, the widest circumference in this measurement is the hip. And when you divide the hip by 6, in this case we have 7. You can just simply have twice of that as the wideness of the skirt. Or you can have 12, you can use 12 or use 13 as the wideness of each panel. So having understood that, let's now see how we can calculate. So we'll be starting with the center front. First of all, let's mark out our vertical measurements. The waist to the hip waist to knee, and then we have the full length of the skirt. So because our body is kind of small, we are going to be using half of our initial measurements. The full length of the skirt is 44, so half of that we have 22. So waist to hip, this will now be our waist to hip, and then this will be our waist to knee. We'll be using this as our waist to hip and our waist to knee for the sake of this illustration. So here is our hip, here is the knee, and here is the waist. This fabric, this is unfold, and the wideness is 6 inches. That means when you open it up, you are going to have 12. Now let's impute the measurements that we calculated. When we calculated 26 divided by 6, we had 4.5, and then we said we'll add 1 inch to that to join the two sides. So we are having 5.5. So this is 5.5. When it is unfold, we are going to have 2.75. So this is unfold, we are going to be marking 2.75. For the hip, we have 8. Unfold, that will be 4. So the hip line will mark 4. And then for the knee, based on our calculation, we have 7.2. This is where we have 7.2. That is, you use the 7.25 line. So divided by 2, simply fold your tape into 2, and you have 3.6. So we mark 3.6. And then use a ruler to connect that. The waist to the hip to the knee. And then from the knee, you connect straight to the edge of the fabric or the pattern. Like this. And then you blend out these sharp corners using a French curve, or you can use your freehand. You don't want to have any false hip. The same thing with the knee area. You also blend that out. So this is the side, this is the center front. After you have gotten the center front, the next thing is to cut the side panel. Before we go to the side panel, let's see how the center back will look like, because we can still use the center front to cut the center back. Now for the center back, whereas we use 6 inches unfold for this, we are using 7.5 for this. 7.5 unfold, which means when you open up 7.5, you are going to have 15 inches. So the wideness of the back panel should be 15 inches. 15 inches wide, while the front panel will be 12 inches wide. 12 inches wide. The extra 1.5 is to accommodate the zipper. So here is the zipper allowance. So after you have gotten it like this, what you do is to simply take the center front and place it on top of this center back, making sure that this side is on this side. You will not start here, you place it here, and then you just simply trace it out and cut. If you don't want to do it like that, then you can go ahead and retake the measurements again, but I think that will be better. So simply take this, place it on top and just trace it out. So this is our center back, and of course you also blend here in and here, no sharp corners, and then you now cut here open. So this will now be in two parts. You are going to have two of this, you are going to have one of this. So let's see how the back panel will be like. Now remember the explanation that we gave from the beginning. For the center panel, you only need ½ inch to join the center to number 1 and half to join the center to number 3, and that was how we arrived at adding 1 inches to the original measurements. But for the side, we said the side panels, either 1 or 3, they work the same way. We need ½ inch to join to this number 2. If you are going to be turning with a lining, we need ½ inch, and then we also need the side seam, and so we concluded that we add 2 inches. So it means that for this side panel, for the side waist, let me use here, side waist will now be 4.5 plus the 2 inches that we said, which will give us 6.5 inches. And then the hip, side hip, we had 7 before, we also add 2, we now have 9 inches. And then for the knee, we had 6.2 before, we will now add 2 inches, and then we now have 8.2. So for the side panel, this is the one we are going to be making use of: 6.5, 9, and then 8.2. And don't forget that this side is also unfold. It's unfold. And then because of these 2 inches that we are adding, we are not going to use 12 inches wide. Instead, we are going to use 14 inches wide for the side panel. We'll be using 14 inches wide so that it can accommodate the seam allowances. So when you fold 14 into 2, you are going to have 7. So let me just mark out. Here we have our hip line and our knee line. So do it to also mark your waist to knee and so on. So on the waistline we are going to be using 6.5. So unfold, that will give us 3.25. That's 3.25. And then for the hip we are now using 9, and 9 unfold will give us 4.5. 4.5. The name 8.2. So unfold, that will give us 4.1. Now impute it 4.1. And then you take your ruler to connect that. Also do well to blend out this part so that you don't have any sharp edges. So this is the side panel. Now if you do not want to do it like this, after you have placed your measurements, your fabric, you've already taken the 14 inches and you have folded it into 2, you now have 7. You have, this one is unfold. You now take this center front that is also unfold, you now place it on top of this one, and then you now add the extra inch, you add it to the side. The difference between the center and the side is just 1 inch. 1 inch, and unfold, that will be half. So what you do is that you simply add half inch. When you place this on this, you now add half inch. So you see that this is 3 and this is 3.5. Do you see it? So when you place this on this, you simply just add half inch. Because it's unfold, you add half inch. On the knee you add half inch, and then you connect. I'm using dotted lines because I don't want to like this. And then this side has extra 2 inches to make the flare to come out very well, and then you now connect here to that point. So those are the 2 ways you can do the side panel. It is either you just use the calculation that we have done, or you place the center panel on top and just add same allowance to the side, and then you have your side panel. So when you are cutting this side panel, you are going to be cutting 4. 2 for the front and 2 for the back. So you can cut it twice. You fold your fabric and cut. Okay, by the time you fold your fabric into 2 and cut, if you fold your fabric, it means that you're going to have 4 of this. So you can cut the one after the other. After cutting this, you now use this one to cut 3 more, so that the 4 will not be the same. Do you understand? After you have cut this, you now use this one to cut 3 more. Then you can now have them for the side. So that is just all for the 6 pieces skirts. So we're practicalizing it on paper in our next video. So I hope you find these tutorials helpful. Give me a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe. If you are yet to subscribe to this channel, kindly subscribe and let us know what you think about the video by leaving comments below in the comment section. Until next time, when I see you again, I remain Chijo.